up watching a lot of web series, Netflix, and rest of it. I think that takes your mind off the work, and there is some really good stuff, good quality stuff, which is getting produced. So I think that's a good unwinding thing. The only thing which I can be regular at, and I can be more religious about it across the weather. So walking. We'd been to Andamans. I'd never been there before. So I mean, it's top on the mind, and so lovely place to be. So I'll quote that. Would be my laptop with a hoard of movies into it. I carry it with me wherever I go. So the content is more luxury than the cabinet itself. That's how I put it.
SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Engineering, Medical and Health Sciences, Management, Dental, Science and Humanities, Law, Agriculture Sciences, Hotel Management. Admissions open.
When you live in a fast-moving, ever-changing world, life brings forth unlimited possibilities. Yours to explore, excite, enjoy, educate, evaluate, and elucidate with elan. Never stop moving forward with Darwin Platform Group. Darwin Platform Group, the visionaries.
ThyroCare, the trust, the truth.
Our next panel is talking about technology reinvented at the workplace. The pandemic has accelerated the adoption of digital technologies across industries. How are we going to be adopting artificial intelligence and machine learning as we go forward? What are going to be the game changers? For that, I'd like to invite my colleague Rukmini Rao, Consulting Editor, Business Today, to please introduce the next panel.
Joining me on this panel is a stellar set of people who are leaders in their own right in digital transformation in their own companies, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Daisy Chittilapilly, MD, Digital Transformation Office, Cisco, Subram Natarajan, who is the Chief Technology Officer at IBM India in South Asia, and Dr. Rohini Srivathsa, who is the National Technology Officer, Microsoft India. The pandemic, of course, has accelerated the adoption of digital technologies and artificial intelligence, machine learning in all spheres of life, and especially across all vertical and industries. I want to get opening thoughts from all of you on which are the areas or the trends that you're seeing, especially with respect to artificial intelligence and machine learning. Daisy, perhaps we can start with you.
If you talk to any enterprise, even if you talk to the government or you talk to the social sector, the conversation tends to veer towards the power of artificial intelligence in getting more customer intelligence and more better decision making. I think we're starting to see post-pandemic with a great degree of adoption of hybrid work. We're also seeing that shift from the external to the internal, with enterprises using AI to focus on internal use cases as well. Use cases like employee productivity, employee experience, and so on. So that's one clear focus. The power of artificial intelligence to make better sense of data and make better decisions is clearly across industries, perhaps the number one trend. It's an old trend. It's just gained speed post the pandemic. The second trend we're clearly seeing is, at least as Cisco, certainly perhaps because of the vantage point we're seeing, is the integration of cybersecurity and artificial intelligence ops, IT ops, right? So AI, the integration of cybersecurity and AI ops. And again, that one is a no-brainer because you would think that the biggest concern for enterprises, particularly enterprises that are becoming more and more digitized, and businesses which are becoming more digitized, and governments which are becoming more digitized, is to use the power, is to harness the power of AI to detect and to mitigate cybersecurity risks. So that's another area. Integration of cybersecurity with AI ops is another space we see increased adoption in. And the third one is, of course, the one where we see the combination of hyper automation technologies powered by AI.
So, what are we seeing at IBM today?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Daisy said is true across the board, right? I think there is a general acceptance that this whole pandemic around 2020 significantly accelerated the digital transformation, and AI played a pivotal role in this transformation. So when we look at general areas where we see AI adoption accelerating, that is AI being an accelerant for the whole digital transformation, I would put it in sort of a 3 or 4 areas similar to what Daisy has mentioned. The first area is customer engagement and experience, of course. Here, the idea would be to use AI either as a conversation engine to provide digital services through contact centers. And there is a heavy use of NLP, NLU technology, which, by the way, has evolved quite a bit in the past few years. By the way, the same technology is also used in help desk functions in many of the companies for their internal facing support functions as well. The second area I could think of is what was highlighted by Daisy already, the intelligent automation space. See, the notion of RPA, robotic process automation, existed even before 2020, but somewhat, sort of a spotty in the organization. With the work from home culture in 2020, companies were forced to think of AI infused automation in order to bring forth automation in many of the business processes and transform them to offer sort of a more uniform and standardized manner of their services. Third, I would say AI on its own found its way into many of the application areas. So for example, a curated set of products that IBM does is in the AI models and applications to assist a lot of businesses in navigating many aspects of return to work challenge. Lastly, one should not forget the AI impact in the healthcare sector. Particularly in the pandemic management, drug discovery, vaccine distribution. For example, IBM, in order to help researchers generate potentially a new drug candidate for COVID-19, we applied, a lot of AI generative frameworks to essentially 3,000 novel molecules. Now we shared these molecules in the Creative Commons, and of course, this hoping this helped all the research community in developing the drug design. So, in terms of the industries, also almost all sectors leveraged AI across the board. Actually, it became sort of a necessity to bring AI into the fold, and in many of the corporate functions, we saw banking, retail, government, communication sectors making use of the technology and gaining traction quite widely.
Rohini, what are the trends that you see kind of staying beyond the pandemic and which are going to be systemic in nature?
The Uber point, right, that we all saw during the pandemic, and Satya made a comment that we've seen digitization worth 2 years in 2 months. And clearly digitization drives data, which then drives the use of algorithms to create value from that data. Right, and that is while immediate trend we are seeing in some of the use cases that my colleagues talked about, but has, as you said, much longer term trends in the way organizations are reimagining what their business might look like. So if you saw the pandemic as kind of responding phase, that we were all down to responding to the crisis, then recovering from the crisis and reimagining phase, right? That reimagining phase is very, very interesting. The fact that India is really noting among the highest, if not the highest in the world, in terms of the level of increase in the use of AI as compared to other major economies, including the US, UK, and Japan, is a very good sign. It's also a question of then continuing on that optimism to really get that leadership value. So as a longer term reimagine phase, right, going beyond the pandemic to say, what is my business going to look like, or what is my government services going to look like as a bigger trend than the early phases of respond and recover. I think the ideas of engaging with your customers through digital channels, through digital assistants, and really taking that customer experience to the next level will be an important one. I think the ability for manufacturing and office locations to become a lot more autonomous and a lot more resilient in terms of being able to have always on facilities, even if there is some kind of a disruption. Those will be important. Similarly, I think our ways of work is probably changed forever. And there will be more and more digital assistants that will come into the workplace, and there will be this augmentation of people and AI in terms of becoming more productive in terms of work.
It's very interesting that you pointed out that India is in the forefront of adoption of AI and ML compared to many other nations. I'm sure us and also our viewers would want to know what kind of research that you see happening out of India in your own respective companies that are, out there for the world to use.
India becomes for many organizations like IBM, Cisco, and Microsoft included, an amazing hotbed. Or I would say almost a laboratory for working on research on problems which are very hard in some ways. Let me explain hard, right? You have to deal with situations where, one, there is huge diversity of languages, and huge bandwidth issues, very low cost. You need to have ability to do machine learning, for example, on the edge, which can work under discontinuity of communications, for example. Similarly, there are a lot of social issues so I'll give you a few examples. Microsoft Research has been in India for about 15 plus years. And over the last few years, some very interesting areas that are being worked on from here. One, of course, in the area of language. And from language translation perspective, today, the kind of work that is coming out of India is allowing the support of more than 10 languages from that can be applied by actually 11 Indian languages, which in addition of Oriya most recently, that can enable more than 90% of Indians to access information. Very interesting work is happening on low resource machine learning at the edge from Microsoft Research that will become a key part for embracing intelligence in agriculture and healthcare, in water, in biodiversity. I mean, you name it, right? There's all across the board interesting applications for that. Then similarly, India becomes also a very interesting place for doing AI and machine learning and these type of research on topics which are of societal impact. So some interesting work happening on health and safety monitoring for NGOs who are running school midday meals program that Microsoft is doing along with Accenture. Similarly, work happening on aquatic livelihood with the likes of Jal Jeevika to understand aquaculture and how do you ensure that there is right amount of productivity in those kind of farms. So there's a lot that from a social impact perspective, India offers the opportunity to do work that can be
sure. Daisy, Subram, could I get your quick thoughts as well on what is the kind of work that is happening at both your companies?
There are numerous areas where vendors and research institutions are focusing on bringing value to the organizations and the society at large, right? For example, when we are talking about supply chain optimization, we did one of the work with Parley, where the whole idea is to during the pandemic times, how do you predict demand in a complex, multi-party network? And then, essentially the idea would be to reduce time to market, right size the inventory across the supply chain throughout, right? And AI played a key role, right? And, the first point of adopting this technology and evolution is definitely in the area of customer interaction engagement, right? You might have seen what has happened with ICICI Prudential, where the virtual assistant Lego, interacts with the policyholders much more at ease now. It's just not only the number of languages that we can support, but also the dialects and how the whole NLP has evolved, right? In terms of the core research areas, neurosymbolic question answering, more and more similar to that of how a human being would behave. And that is a core area of artificial intelligence research.
Daisy?
So our approach has been two-pronged. One is, of course, to build artificial intelligence, machine language capabilities into the platforms that we build. And we're part of a global supply chain of engineering for Cisco. So clearly to build and integrate more and more AI capabilities into the platforms that we put out there, into the market, and we use internally as well. So, for example, during the pandemic, India became the second largest user of WebEx for Cisco worldwide, thanks to the hybrid work from home explosion that happened in India. And it was also the time when we brought a lot of AI capabilities into that platform. Like Rohini mentioned, AI that helps to translate and transcribe, right? AI that recognizes gestures and body language that allows a virtual meeting participant or participants to interact with each other in a more inclusive, more natural kind of a setting. And of course, assistants which can capture key content, can action items from the meeting, and so on and so forth. And internally, again, I think it was Subram who mentioned, we had a platform called DNA Spaces, which uses artificial intelligence a lot to decide, what's the floor capacity, where are people on the floor, where are they moving, are they going towards risky spaces or not. So we had platforms externally for customers and outside to use, as well as we were leveraging the same platforms to deal with some of the challenges that we were facing as an enterprise as well.
Right.
But the second part is, we also recognize that this is a space in which not one company can do everything all on their own, right? So we've been leveraging a lot of the Indian ecosystem, particularly the startup ecosystem, to put out solutions into the social sector primarily, and also into businesses. And during the pandemic, we built with one of our accelerator partners in the country, our own accelerator called Launch. One of the early graduates of that accelerator, a virtual ICU card that got deployed into the public sector, 3 or 4 of the nodal government hospitals in Bangalore, as an example, and also into some very large hospital chains in the country.
For AI and ML to be more efficient, the more data you feed to this, the results are going to be better. And there's no dearth of data when it comes to India, the kind of data India is generating today. I want to get a quick sense from each of you on, which are the areas that can be game changer for India, given the kind of data that we are generating today.
The key is really approaching this in a more pragmatic way of how we take the data, go through the necessary transformation, the life cycle, in not only collecting the data, but organizing it, analyzing it, and then bringing the AI part of it. Because, if you have bad data, you will end up with bad AI. So therefore, that whole life cycle, what we call as AI ladder, is absolutely critical. It's more of a pragmatic way of how you adopt it. But in general, if you look at the India market, I would venture out and say we have no choice but to bring in AI as sort of a front and center of every discussion. What we went through in 2020 has given a taste of digital consumption of products and services for the society at large, the public and population. Now, how we differentiate one from the other, how companies differentiate one from the other, is precisely going to be through technologies like AI. And therefore, AI will become sort of inevitable, right? Whether it is banks, whether it is retail companies bringing the personalized shopping experience, all kinds of stuff is AI is going to be used in.
Rohini?
India being data rich, is good, but I think the ability to really leverage and bring value from that data is just super critical. By itself, data doesn't do much. You have algorithms and compute to work on it to, and then be part of business processes or whatever to really create value. So I think to your point, there was a recent work again, and NASSCOM had brought out about the Indian economy 2025 5 trillion vision, right. And out of that, about $1 trillion is expected to be digital economy, and out of that, about 450 to 500 billion is supposed to be coming out from data and AI. And the main sectors they are called out are the ones which are clearly top of mind for the Prime Minister and have important economic value also. Agriculture being one, energy being another one. Because in each one of them, whether it's energy, right, there's a huge amount of benefit to be obtained from just demand prediction, management, and rationalization of asset utilization. If you go down the area of logistics and mobility, just huge things to be done in terms of network logistics optimization using geospatial data, traffic pattern analysis. If you go down healthcare, clearly we've seen the optimization of health resource allocation and outbreak prediction. If you go down small and medium businesses, there's so much to be done in terms of just throughput optimization, their productivity and cost competitiveness, creating marketplaces. So across the sectors, there is the major sectors of the economy. There's tremendous potential, but again, it needs to put that data into to get value from that data.
Where do you see India in terms of adoption of industrial robotics, and what are the current challenges? If I can get very quick comments from each of you.
So I think the penetration of industrial robots is fairly poor if you take global statistics. Like if we have, I think, about 3 robots for every 10,000. I think that's the number 10,000 workers, right? That is the kind of penetration for India at this point. The US, on the other hand, which is not the best in class, I think Germany and China are the best in class, but the number I saw for the US is almost 189 industrial robots. So clearly the gap between us and the countries which are high on productivity, and as a country, we need to be high on productivity, right? So that is obviously, there is now whether 189 is a good number or something less than that is a good number for India remains to be seen, but we are certainly under-penetrated. I think that much is clear. I think it is a matter of manufacturing, for example, is catching up, right? I think auto manufacturing, for example, the auto plants in India are as automated as anywhere else in the world. And if the pandemic has done anything, it is again speeding up the adoption of robotics, because one of the things that manufacturing companies have come to as a realization is we can no longer have a situation where plants are closed for 2 months if we want to be a serious manufacturing destination in the world. Consideration for a country like India is always how do you shift your semi-skilled workers or poorly skilled workers? What will you shift them to, right? So this conversation about increased industrialization, robotic adoption has to go hand in hand with where will you relieve these workers into? So what jobs do you create for them?
So Brown, do you see investments happening in this front where manufacturing companies are willing to do that kind of investment to have robotics to make that a part of their process?
Absolutely. I think there's clearly catching up to do. Right? I mean, as Daisy pointed out, statistically, I think there's a lot of stuff that we do, and probably because of the cost arbitrage structure, we never made that significant advancement in this area. But what we are seeing is that in the whole pandemic has kind of reminded us that we need to start really introducing robotics at scale, not only just bring the skills to a much more standardized and more uniform delivery of the products and services, but more to do with how do you redeploy the existing skill, the human skills to higher order or higher value jobs, right? So that thought has definitely come in. The second area, I think, where the industries have focused on, particularly the manufacturing and process industry, is to sort of introduce many of these functions associated with AI into their process also. Not necessarily just repetitively doing what a robot would do, but for example, visual inspection, where typically a human being is involved in really inspecting and validating the quality of the product and so on. You see increasing amount of AI being used in conjunction with robots to deliver what is needed. So similarly, you see the introduction of robots and AI complementing each other, and the investments that is going into those areas definitely are on the increase. We have a lot of catching up to do.
India will have to take a unique approach to automation, in my view. And what I mean by that is that we will have to find a way in which our workforce has the ability to use AI in an augmented fashion. We will, I don't think, we will be able to take sort of the best way of automating some things, because of the labor cost structure is completely different. And so our real success would lie in, can we take a process and bring into India? And there's some really interesting ideas out there. If you look at education, healthcare, judiciary, you name it, some of the large sectors, right? And maybe manufacturing is within manufacturing also. How do we ensure that the machine learning and automation is augmenting human skills? Of course, there'll be certain areas where there are safety concerns, or there is the danger of a human being getting fatigued, and you want to make sure quality. So those are definitely cases where you would want to have a machine. But I think there are many cases where you will want to have some kind of an augmentation. What that then goes back to the point that Daisy was making is, I think the skilling in India is also unique. Because it is not just skilling of technical stuff. It is not just skilling of people who build AI systems. There's also skilling of people who use AI systems. There are also people who are on the factory floor but understand how to use a digital system that will be augmenting their skill set. So right. I think it's a question of understanding the digital skill set beyond the technical and engineering lens that we often use. And that would create, so if you go down, let's say education space, if you are able to have teachers in the remote areas who are able to use augmentation of AI-based either content platforms or ability to understand how students are doing in the class, but are able to use that as augmentation in terms of their own interaction with students and understanding the students' learning methodology and empathy, etc., then you've created an ability to really use the workforce and enable them with AI. And I think that is a unique method that India needs to use, and the skilling has to then follow what that unique method needs to be.
What would be the future of workplaces post adoption of AI ML? What are the changes that we are going to see? How businesses are going to be functioning, and how offices are going to be? From futuristic lens, probably in the next 2-3 years, the big changes that one should expect.
What we will see is the adoption of many of these technologies, including AI, at scale. And that would require a fair bit of transparency of the technology that we use, the trust and transparency, and that will be an area where a lot of companies will grow, and you will see people wanting to adopt this, establishing the trust, and the technology itself is evolving through trusted and open frameworks, becoming much more evolutionary. And it will become so ubiquitous, so we don't even realize that they are part of how we conduct ourselves, both at home as well as at office. This is the reality. This is what is unfolding in front of us.
We have to relook at the way that work itself is done, right? And to the point about AI and ML, and to the point about augmentation that Rohini made, one of the most successful use cases, or very popular use cases during the pandemic, has been this artificial intelligence powered robo called Flowbot One in Europe, which has been aiding and assisting medical staff to collect and analyze samples, and actually helps with almost 1,000 COVID cases a day. So, it's a great example of augmentation, right? The human-machine interface that we keep talking about, and that balance. So certainly work will change, workspace will change, but work will also change. And I think workers will also change dramatically, right? I think the biggest thing perhaps it's a good note to end on, is we must all keep an open mind to the way in which we will all have to make shifts, whether that's the way we go to work, or not go to work physically, the way we think about work and who we share that work with, and how we are, the kind of work we would do ourselves.
Thank you to all of you for having joined us on this panel. And with that, we conclude the session. And thank you all of you.
Thyrocare, the trust, the truth.